Welcome to CNI Jerusalem Calling, your source for unfiltered Mideast talk radio. I'm your host, Dr. Faye Williams, and we have with us Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. And as I was contemplating the interview today, I was just thinking about how we African Americans gained our freedom after much violence against our people, but the violence was only from one side. And I was just reading there as soon as I asked myself that question that our special guest today has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. I want to just tell you a little bit about Dr. Barghouti before we get started, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about his nomination for the Peace Prize. Dr. Barghouti is a Palestinian democracy activist. He was a candidate for the presidency of the Palestinian National Authority in 2005. Finishing second to Mr. Mahmoud Abbas. And, of course, Mr. Barghouti was born in Jerusalem. The Barghoutis are, like many of our families here in the United States, an extended family, a large family from the Ramallah area. And their members include, of course, our brother, the Fatah leader, Marwan Barghouti, who is a distant cousin to Mr. Mustafa Barghouti. Mr. Barghouti is, of course, a medical doctor trained in the former Soviet Union and Jerusalem. He also received a degree in management from Stanford University in the United States, and he currently lives in Ramallah. But I want to tell you, before we bring Dr. Barghouti on, just a little bit about his nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize by Mary Maguire, who herself is a Nobel Peace Laureate and co-founder of Peace People in Northern Ireland. This nomination was submitted last month, and in her letter, she cited Dr. Barghouti's commitment to nonviolence in his personal and public life as an effort that is truly in the Gandhian spirit. Of course, we might also say in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King. Recognition for Dr. Barghouti, she said, would be a recognition of not only his spirit of peace and nonviolence, but also of the Palestinian nonviolent movement, which gives us all hope for the future of Palestine, Israel, and the Middle East community. Hello, Dr. Barghouti.
Hello, how are you?
What an honor this is to be talking with you today. I just want to ask you, I want to start this off with talking about our own president, Barack Obama. And I wonder if you could just give us a little bit of an impression of what you think about President Barack Obama and whether or not it gives you hope for the peace process.
Well, as you know, and I think many people would share this opinion with me, we were very impressed and we felt a lot of optimism about the election of President Obama. I think a lot of people in the whole world shared this feeling, and that was because we felt this was a great change. As I said once, that was the day when President Obama was elected. Probably that was the day when the whole life and struggle of people like Martin Luther King and the whole civil rights movement has achieved its peak. So we were optimistic and with lots of promises. And we were very encouraged by the speech he made in Cairo in June last year when he spoke. He was the first American president in office who would give a human face to the Palestinian people and the Palestinian struggle, reflect their human face, comparing the struggle of Palestinians with that of African Americans for their freedom and liberty and equality. Yet, since then, we've been seeing, we haven't seen much progress. What we've seen is actually some sort of fortunate deterioration in the positions. He spoke about complete freeze of settlement activities as precondition for achieving peace, as he spoke about obligations that Israel must hold. Unfortunately, it seems that instead of the United States pressuring Israel to abide by international law, Israel was pressuring the United States to change its positions, and that's why we got stuck. In my opinion today, it is quite unfortunate. All these promises and all these wonderful expectations have transformed into some kind of frustration and disappointment. And I don't know what will happen next, but in my opinion, this is the issue of the Middle East, and the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict totally depends on American administration deciding that it should pressure Israel and that it should stop the situation where Israel is treated as an impunitive partner, impunitive to international law, impunitive to international humanitarian law, and above, actually, international law. There needs to be a pressure to end this situation, yeah.
Let us not give up hope, Dr. Barghouti. I know it's been a long time, a long wait for the Palestinian people, but many people here in the United States are experiencing that same frustration, but try to remember that President Obama had lots of things on his plate when he came into office. He inherited a lot of things, and as I say to my friends here in America, you know, we elected him for 4 years, not for 1 year, so we didn't expect him to be able to accomplish everything in just that 1 year, but I'm still hopeful that he's going to work more forcefully on the problem. What do you think are some of the hurdles that need to be crossed in order to foster a lasting peace in the region?
Well, it's very simple. I think what we need is an acceptance of a very basic human principle, which is that we, the Palestinians and the Israelis, should be treated as equal human beings with equal rights and equal duties. And if that principle is accepted, the road to peace will be immediately open. Unfortunately, we will never see peace unless this occupation ends. The fact is that Israel has dispossessed so many Palestinians during the last 62 years and has occupied West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem for more than 42 years, which has become the longest occupation in history. And I believe that ending occupation is the way can open the road to a two-state solution and can open the road to a lasting peace. Unfortunately, what we see today is that's why we were so adamant on the issue of settlements, that because we've reached a critical point, a crossing point, where more Israeli illegal settlements in the occupied territories would simply mean the destruction of the potential and possibility of a Palestinian state, and thus the destruction of the possibility of peace based on two-state solution. As I said, the main principle that would allow us to move forward is to accept us as equal human beings. Unfortunately, the continuation of occupation has led to the creation of something that can only be described as an apartheid system in Palestine. If you want me to elaborate and explain that, I can do that.
Okay, but first of all, Dr. Barghouti, we'd like to take a call from Rob in Wilmington.
Hello, Dr. Barghouti. My name is Rob Abel. I'm an ophthalmologist. I met you in Ramallah at dinner one evening in May, and I was so impressed with what you had done for clinical services on the West Bank. I understand that the first question is they're probably very much disrupted by the way the Israelis have relocated the roads and the roadblocks. And the second question is there any availability for American physician assistance on the West Bank?
First of all, yes, the medical system we have created, we've celebrated this year the 30th anniversary of the creation of Palestinian Medical Relief Society, which has become a health movement to provide health care to the primary health care to rural areas, to underdeveloped regions and marginalized groups in society, and it has been a very big successful story. Yes, we have interruptions. The main interruptions relate to the presence of continuous presence of 600 military Israeli checkpoints, which block the movement
Dr. Barghouti,
the movement.
Dr.
Yes?
Barghouti, we're going to have to ask you to hold on for a moment. We're about to go to break, and Rob, you may either hold on or listen after you hang up for the remainder of your answer. We had just had Rob ask a question before we went to break, and I'd like to go back to Dr. Barghouti to finish responding to that question.
So, unfortunately, our ability to provide services to those who need it is obstructed frequently, first of all, by the 600 military checkpoints, which suppress the movements or obstruct the movement. And the second major obstacle is the wall that has been built in 85% of the time inside the occupied territories and not on the borders between Israel and the Palestinian territories. That wall is 3 times the length and twice as high as the Berlin Wall used to be. A lot of people have been enclaved behind the wall, This has disrupted the whole system that we have managed to build to provide health care to people. People cannot cross on time, and that's why we are facing very dramatic cases. For instance, we have many pregnant women who were forced to give birth at checkpoints or in front of the gates of the wall because they were not allowed to access hospitals. During the last few years, 80 women had this unfortunate situation, and 30% of them lost their babies. The other problem is that there are lots of people with heart attacks who cannot have access to hospitals due to obstruction of movement, and many people have died. Of course, now the major problem is in Gaza, which is under siege, and there, unfortunately, 860 people have died so far because they could not get referral or travel to receive medical care that is not available in Gaza. On the second question about the possibility of American physicians coming to volunteer with us and work, that would be most welcome, especially in certain fields and specialties that are missing here, like, let's say, pediatric neurology or hematology, pediatric neurosurgery, urology, for instance. We welcome, even in other specialties, we would welcome any possibility for volunteers to come and work with us and help us and spend some time with us, of course, as much as their work allows. We have had many volunteers working with us, and this has been a very successful operation. We would welcome if some people would like to come and work with us.
We also want to go to Malia from Great Falls, who's on the line.
Hi, this is Malia Haddad. He mentioned that American pressure is needed to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian problem. And how about pressure from Arab regimes? It seems that many people feel that they are really not doing enough. And I was wondering if he has any comments on the topic. How much are they doing to help resolve this problem?
I think they are not doing enough, that's for sure. But many Arab governments do not do much because they don't want to upset the United States administration. And I think the Arabs have tried their best by creating the Arab Initiative, which provides very good pace for the peace, where Israel would end occupation, in return have lasting peace with everybody, including all Arab countries. Unfortunately, this never materialized because Israel, instead of accepting the peace offer, they decided to invade what was under Palestinian Authority. And since then, we had an obstruction of the possibility of peace. And the most recent elections in Israel has produced the most right-wing, extreme, racist government, which is obstructing now the possibility for peace. I think the Arab countries can do more, that's for sure. And I think what we need is a real strong concerted effort to demand the application of the Arab Initiative. When I said that the United States should pressure Israel, we all know that the only country in the world that can pressure Israel is the United States. Israel is totally dependent on military aid from the United States, on other kind. Israel is the largest recipient of aid from the United States in the world. But also it relies completely on the support of American technology and strategic alliance and so on. If the United States wants to see stability in the Middle East and wants to see the Palestinian issue resolved, it is the main country that can exercise that pressure. And we're saying that at the end of the day, such a pressure, if exercised, will be for the sake of both Palestinians and Israelis, because I don't think any Israeli could be proud about the fact that their occupation has become the worst system and form of apartheid in the 24th century, the worst system of segregation, while the whole world does not accept the idea of segregation. I think for the future of both Palestinians and Israelis, for those who want to see peace in this area, peace that is governed by goodwill and mutual cooperation and mutual interest rather than a situation enforced by military power and military oppression.
You know, I want to thank Malia, first of all, for that question. And Dr. Barghouti, I just want to say, I know the situations are very different in Haiti and what is happening with the Palestinian people, but I know that the American people are very generous when they know the facts. What is it that we can do to help the American people understand what really happens in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? We just kind of have an absence of information here unless we've been there.
Well, the problem you have is very much related to the media outlets. I think there has been a failure in presenting the situation as it is. I think there is a certain domination of the Israeli narrative about what really happened in this place. And there is, to a large extent, an absence of the Palestinian narrative. What we need is an objective narrative, a narrative that describes exactly what has happened. I think this lack of knowledge is a serious issue. I think American people are good people, and I think their heart is in the right place. If they know the truth, I am sure the vast majority of them will be supportive of the right of the Palestinian people. But what they need is to find the truth. We are trying our best. We have some websites which try to provide information like the PalestineMonitor.org, which is a good outlet. We have just developed a very important DVD which we think would help a lot in understanding the situation here. We call it Our Story, and it tries to present the real Palestinian narrative. We try to get to some media programs. Sometimes we had a good success last October when I appeared with a Jewish American activist for peace, Anna Bolzer, in the Jon Stewart Daily Show, and I think it had a good impact. We had a similar success with 60 Minutes program on CBS before that. But unfortunately, most of the programs, most of the TV stations are not showing the truth, are not showing the reality. And what people need to know is the reality and the truth. The truth is that in this particular conflict, it's not Israel that is the victim. In this conflict, it is the Palestinians who are the victims. And in this case, time has come for Israel to end its occupation and end its oppression of the Palestinian people. Time has come to accept the right of Palestinians to be free, to have the same things that everybody is entitled to, which is liberty, freedom, justice, and democracy.
You know, I remember some years ago, Palestinians here in the United States used to go around and hold meetings in homes and offices, and it seems that they made a greater effort to explain to us what was going on there. I know that Israeli groups or Israeli support groups often invite people to come to Israel to see what is going on. And obviously you see the Israeli side of it, but are there similar groups that invite people to come to see what is happening with the Palestinian people?
Absolutely, yes, of course. There are lots of international solidarity movement that is trying to bring people here. And it's the best way if people can come to Palestine, and see the reality. Because I think one day in Palestinian territories is better than hundreds of lectures. I mean, one day here, if you see the wall by your own eyes, if you see the system of discrimination by your own eyes, that is enough. Unfortunately, many of the American tourists who come to Israel never visit the Palestinian territories or never have the chance to listen to the Palestinian story. So the first thing that should be done is that when people come here, they should ask to see the Palestinian territories and be with Palestinians. And frequently they would be misled by telling them that it is insecure to go to Palestinian territories, which is not true at all.
Okay, and when we come back, we'll finish that conversation. I'm Faye Williams, your host, and welcome back to CNI Jerusalem Calling, your source for unfiltered Mideast talk radio. Dr. Barghouti, I was talking about the American people often having so little information about what actually goes on under the occupation of the Palestinian people. Would you just sort of give us a little bit about what actually happens on a day-to-day basis? I know when I have been there, I have seen beautiful homes, once beautiful homes that were demolished. What happens with that space when the Israelis demolish people's homes?
Well, during the last 10 years, the Israeli army and the government has demolished at least 86,000 Palestinian homes. That is a lot of homes.
Yes.
During the last war on Gaza, they've demolished 25,000 houses. Regardless of the fact that there was a lot of promise to fix these houses, none was repaired because the Israeli government is not allowing a single sack of cement or a single piece of glass to enter Gaza since more than a year. That means these people who lost their houses, they have no other place to go to. 90% of them have gone back to the same destroyed houses, and they're living there in the ruins in the middle of a very cold winter. Today, by the way, we had some snow here in Palestine. And you can imagine what happened to these people who have to sit in the ruins of their homes. The other problem is land confiscation, land appropriation for no reason. I mean, except that Israel is violating the international law and annexing piece by piece the land of the Palestinians in the West Bank. And this is, of course, depriving people from space, depriving people from ability to build houses, depriving people from ability to build schools, health clinics, universities, etc. One major problem is the fact that we have, as I said, a system of segregation. Today, most of the main roads that are most important roads in the West Bank are prohibited for Palestinians. Even during the worst time of segregation in the United States or during the worst time of apartheid in South Africa, there wasn't a situation of segregation of roads. You had segregation of buses, maybe of schools. But here we have even segregation of roads, where most main roads are prohibited for Palestinians, but they can be used exclusively only by Israeli soldiers or people. To me, that's the worst form of discrimination. If we are caught driving on some of these main roads, me or any other Palestinian, we could be sentenced to 6 months in jail.
Wow.
I'll give you another example. I was born in Jerusalem many years ago, and I worked as a medical doctor in Jerusalem for 15 years. And since 5 years, the Israeli army prevents me from reaching Jerusalem where my sister lives. They don't allow me to go and visit her. They don't allow me to go and visit my old hospital. And if I am caught in Jerusalem, they would arrest me, as they did 4 times while I was campaigning for president during the presidential campaign. The worst thing, which maybe could make the audience understand the situation, that if a Palestinian in Jerusalem gets married to a woman in West Bank or vice versa, he would not be allowed to live with his wife, because if he moves to West Bank to live with his wife, he would lose his residency in Jerusalem, which means he loses a lot of things. And if his wife wants to come and live with him in Jerusalem, they would not allow her because she does not have a Jerusalem ID. Imagine the situation of thousands of families like that, where the husband and wife are either from West Bank or Jerusalem. To me, this is the worst form of discrimination. While if a Jewish person flies into Israel from anywhere in the world, from New York or Siberia, he immediately gets citizenship in the airport, and then he can live not only anywhere he wants in Israel, but also he can live anywhere he wants in our West Bank, in one of the illegal Israeli settlements, and he could keep the citizenship. To me, this is a system of segregation that is unprecedented. During the last 42 years of occupation, almost 40% of all adult Palestinian males were put in jail for short or long periods of time. We have 3 Palestinians today. One of them is Nobel Barghouti, one is Faye Barghouti, and another one is Akram Wahsh, who have been in jail for 31 years. This is the longest time anybody has ever been in jail in modern history. This is even longer than the time that Nelson Mandela spent in jail. There are 10,500 Palestinians in jail, and there is one Israeli soldier who was captured in Gaza, whose name is Shalit. The whole world knows about Shalit, but nobody knows about the names of the 10,500 Palestinian prisoners. And what I say is that Shalit should be released and go home to his family, but all the thousands of Palestinian prisoners, including 322 children who are in jail, should also be released and go to their families. The issue here is about a serious system of discrimination, of segregation, of oppression, and painful outcome, because today I was talking to some international observers in Hebron. We were talking about the health situation, and I said, unfortunately, when they evaluate the health situation here, they only talk about disease and mortality, but nobody thinks about the long-term impact of very stressful situation. When you are under occupation for 42 years, when you have such an absence of any possibility to be certain about how your tomorrow will be, the inability to plan, this horrible stress of oppression leads to many diseases, and that's why we today in Palestine have one of the highest rates in the world of hypertension, diabetes, and heart, and many other non-communicable diseases, which is awful. It's the outcome of terrible stress, besides, of course, the psychological impact, which is leaving terrible things. I am sure many Israelis are also stressed out. And that's why we need to change the situation and the system so that nobody would be stressed.
Well, sure, and I'm glad you mentioned this is stress for both sides. And what the diseases you mentioned kind of parallel the ones that African Americans have a history of having here in the United States, even though all of these years after we have so-called overcome segregation, there are still effects on African American people from, that historical mistreatment, so I can imagine what it's like. Now, you mentioned the children in jail. Is there anyone who sees after these children? Are they mixed in with adult prisoners, or do they have a special juvenile facility?
No. They are in horrible situation. They are imprisoned with adults. They're not separated from them. They don't have any help to get their education or anything like that. They're interrogated in a harsh manner, and many of them have been arrested recently because they were participating in our nonviolent, peaceful activities. We demonstrate every Friday in a nonviolent, peaceful manner. I believe in nonviolence, and we're advocating nonviolence, but many of these children, unfortunately, have been arrested while they were peacefully demonstrating. And those who were arrested were lucky because I think others have been killed, actually. There is a young child who was 10 years old in Merlin who was shot in the head, and unfortunately he died instantly. Several other children are attacked in this manner, but of course the arrest of children and putting them in jail with adults is something that is totally unacceptable, and especially that they are put in very crowded prisons and under terrible conditions with poor nutrition and in lack of accessibility to education, which is, of course, completely counterproductive at the end of the day. One other form of imprisonment we have here is what the Israelis call the administrative detention. And in this case, they are using the emergency laws of the previous British mandatory time, which was, by the way, cancelled in Britain. The origin of these laws were done in Britain in the 40s, and they were applied in Palestine when Palestine was under the British mandate. And now the Israeli government still uses the mandatory laws, which were cancelled in Britain itself. And these laws allow them to arrest people without charges and keep them in jail for 6 months and then renew the imprisonment again and again and again. We know of one Palestinian who was put in jail for 6 years without being charged and without them saying why they are arresting him, because they say that this is a military secret and they can use this cover, the administrative detention, to practically arrest anybody without any specified reason.
When we come back, I wanted to mention another thing that I've seen when I was there on a trip, and that is just the total destruction of the olive trees, and I want you to address what impact that has on the Palestinian farmers when we come back and your ability to have food for your family. Before we went to break, Dr. Barghouti, we were talking about the impact of the destruction of the olive trees on the farmers and our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Would you comment on that? Because I think, again, many Americans don't really understand all of what goes on and how far-reaching these acts are under occupation.
Again, I am sure if the American people get to know the truth and the knowledge, they would be totally supportive of the rights of the Palestinians and to end this injustice and oppression. And about the trees, let me tell you, first of all, I want to explain a little bit why the olive tree is so important to Palestinians. We have olive trees that were planted here since thousands of years. We have some very old olive trees, like we call them the Roman trees, because some of them are more than 1,000 years old. For Palestinians, if you look at a mountain in some Palestinian villages, you will see the mountain looks like a piece of art, in my opinion. The hard work of peasants over hundreds of years to prepare the ground, to pave the roads, and to plant the trees, and to harvest the olive trees. It's a very nice picture. When you look at a mountain, you see the hard work of people over years and years and years. When the Israeli bulldozers come, uproot the trees so that they would build the wall or build a settlement or build a road to an illegal settlement, that is like heartbreaking for these peasants, for these farmers who've inherited this land since hundreds of years and who see these plants which are the main source of income for them in most of the cases. They see the uprooting of trees that they've taken care of for a very long period of time, and then they see the bulldozers come and uproot these trees one after the other. It's like killing their children, and unfortunately during the process of building the wall, since 2002 on, the Israeli bulldozers have uprooted 1.5 million trees, mainly olive trees and other kinds of some fruit trees. And this has become a serious disaster and a serious destruction of environment. It's not just that. It's more than that. There is serious destruction because of the build-up of many chemical factories inside the occupied territories, which produce a lot of dangerous waste, which is usually thrown on the area of the Palestinian villages, including open sewage system, which really has transformed life in some Palestinian villages into a nightmare because of the smell, because of the diseases that can come with this sewage system. So what we practically see is not only uprooting of trees, but also serious destruction of the environment. And in the long run, you would ask yourself, why is this a short-sighted policy? Is it because they want to make some profit from building these settlements or building the wall? Because at the end of the day, we have a very small country. I mean, Palestine is a very small area, and the whole size of Palestine and Israel, Palestinian territories and Israel together is also very small. So this destruction of environment is going to hurt the future of everybody. The most painful thing is this specific uprooting of the olive trees, which, as I said, is the most painful experience to Palestinian farmers and Palestinians in general.
How serious do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu is about getting to negotiations or getting to the negotiations table? And then I want to go to whether there's any Palestinian reconciliation talks in the works now.
I don't trust Mr. Netanyahu. I don't trust him because of his history. I don't trust him because I know he's he's a great master of managing the media. I know he's quite knowledgeable in this field, and he knows how to manipulate the media. That's very well known.
Okay.
And he's a smart man. But at the same time, I must say why I don't trust him. Not only because of his history, but also because of his positions that were announced recently that leave no space for peace. He announced that Israel would never accept to discuss or negotiate the issue of Jerusalem. Instead of accepting what we are calling for, which is that Jerusalem should be the capital of two states, Palestine and Israel, he wants to keep the whole of Jerusalem, including Arabic Jerusalem, as a unified Jewish city. Okay. Second, he refuses to go back to 67 borders, which is internationally accepted as the borders of the Palestinian state and the borders of the occupied territories where occupation should end. He also says he will not remove settlements, and he says, frankly and bluntly, that he's not ready to negotiate the issue of Palestinian refugees. So practically, if you take all his statements together, and these are new statements, he leaves no space for negotiations. I think to get to peace, there should be a real change in Israel, and a government that is not controlled by Mr. Netanyahu or his foreign minister, Mr. Lieberman, who does not even try to hide his racist approach.
Let's see if we can go to some of the questions on are Palestinian reconciliation talks still in the works? And do you think we'll be having elections anytime soon?
That's what I hope for. I think today there were meetings for the first time since months between Fatah and Hamas in Gaza. That is encouraging. I hope it would help reach a reconciliation as soon as possible. I think both parties, in this case Fatah and Hamas, have been responsible for this unacceptable division, and both of them have to accept the basic principle of democracy, which means Palestinians are allowed to choose their leaders freely and democratically every 4 years like other people do, and we have to get to these elections as soon as possible.
And I've got to ask on that note, would you consider running for president?
If there are fair elections, and if the elections can be guaranteed to be free and fair, I would definitely look into the possibility, but it's not my decision alone. It has to be the decision of a whole movement like we did before.
And Dr. Barghouti, I'm sorry, but we're out of time. It's been an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much, and God bless. talking with you today. Thank you so much, and God bless. Talking with you today. Thank you so